Hey, bro, we can start. Recording started.
Okay. So I posted on the Iskcon Columbus thing also, if anybody wants to join. So I can read the translations first. This is Bol Hari Bol, Sri Nam Kirtan Song 4. Author is Sheila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. The book name is Gitavali and the language is Bengali. So the translation, the first verse. Chant the name of Hari, O brothers, with blissful minds. Chant the name of Hari. Chant the name of Hari, birth after birth in happiness. Chant the name of Hari. Number 2. Chant the name of Hari, O brothers. You have obtained a human birth. Now chant the name of Hari. Chant the name of Hari. Whether you are in happiness or distress, chant the name of Hari. Chant the name of Hari, O brothers, whether in prosperity or misfortune. Chant the name of Hari. Chant the name of Hari. Whether you live at home or in the forest, chant the name of Hari. Remaining in this material world for Krishna's purposes, chant the name of Hari. Chant the name of Hari, O brothers. Give up the association of non-devotees and chant the name of Hari. Chant the name of Hari, falling at the feet of the Vaishnavas. Chant the name of Hari. Chant the name of Hari. Chant the name of Gora and Nityananda. Chant the names of Gora and Gadadhara. Chant the names of Gora and Advaita. So it's a very common theme that's being presented here by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So let's start. Bol Hari Bol, Bol Hari Bol, Bol Hari Bol.
Bol Hari Bol, Bol Hari Bol, Bol Hari Bol.
Aniranande boy, Bolo Hari Bol. Aniranande bhai, Bolo Hari Bol. Janame sukhe bolo Hari Bol. Janame sukhe bolo Hari Bol. Duke tako, bolo Hari Bol.
Dako, Bol Hari Bol.
Duke tako, bolo Hari Bol.
Duke Tako, Bol Hari Bol.
Dihe tako bhako bolo hari bol.
Hari Bol.
Krishna rasa sarada ki bolo hari bol.
Krishna Rasam Sarita ki bolo Hari Bol.
Krishna rasa sarada ki bolo hari bol.
Krishna Rasam Sarita ki bolo Hari Bol.
Hari bol, hari bol, hari bol.
Hari Bol, Bol Hari Bol, Bol Hari Bol.
Asat sange jadi bhai bolo hari bol.
Sangha Chari Bhai Bolo Hari Bol.
Asat sanga chari bhai bolo hari bol.
Asat Sangha Chari Bhai Bolo Hari Bol.
Hari bol, hari bol, hari bol.
Bol Hari Bol, Bol Hari Bol, Bol Hari Bol. Hari Bol, Bol Hari Bol, Bol Hari Bol.
Vaishnava charana podi bolo hari bol.
Hari Bol.
Vaishnava charane podi bolo hari bol.
Vaishnavacharane Pode Pole Hari Bol. Bol Hari Bol.
Nityananda bol, Gaura Nityananda bol.
Gaur Nityananda Bol, Gaur Nityananda Bol.
Gadadhara bol, Gaura Gadadhar bol.
Gaura Gadadhar Bol, Gaura Gadadhar Bol.
Gaura Advaita bol, Gaura Advaita 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 Bol.
Gaura Hari bol, Gaura Hari bol,
Gaur Hari Bol, Gaur Hari Bol, Gaur Hari Bol.
bol, Hari bol, Gaura Hari bol.
Gaur Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jaya Vaishnava Thakur, Vaishnava Thakur, Vaishnava Thakur, Ami Tomar Thakur, Vaishnava
Thakur Jaya Vaishnav Thakur Jaya Vaishnav Thakur Jaya Vaishnav Thakur.
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada.
Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari
Hari
Bol.
Bol.
Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai, Srila
Jai.
Vaishnava ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
So, it's 2 minutes. Should we continue chanting Hare Krishna for 2 minutes?
Yeah, Mataji has joined, Prabhu.
Oh, okay.
Unmute her. Oh, somebody need to unmute.
Oh, I can mute myself. Okay, I'm fine. Okay. Is
Hare
this
Krishna.
being connected to Facebook or anything like that?
There's a live stream going on YouTube, Prabhu.
Okay. What's the link?
Paste it there. Paste again.
I'll put it on the chat.
Yeah.
I'll put it.
Okay.
Where are you located, Urmila Prabhu, right now?
Hillsborough, North Carolina.
Okay. How's the situation there? Is everything okay?
Same as everywhere. I mean, I'm personally in a very nice situation because the temple here is closed as far as festivals and Sunday feasts, but morning program is never closed. And I'm literally a 1-minute walk from the temple. I'm staying with a friend. I'm a 1-minute walk from my daughters, and I'm a 1-minute walk from the temple. So it's very nice. And it's beautiful, nice wooded area, and pretty place. Okay.
We can get started because the devotees will be keep joining anyway. So
Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
Kunja Bihari.
Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janabalava Girivaradari. Gopi Janabalava Girivaradari. Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Ayam Vishnupad, Paramahamsa Parvatiya, Asatar Satyashri Srimad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Iskcon founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Shri Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Shai Mukunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Mathura Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Gangamaya Jamuna Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Gaura Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatyade Satarane Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvadutam Parijana Sahita Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Panchakalpatrubhischa Kripasindhavyevacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we have some things in the chat window. Okay, we'll do that later. So today it's the 16th of May, 2020, Zoom class for Iskcon Columbus on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 6, Creation of the Universal Form, Text 36. Tatapi kirtayam yanga, tatapi kirtayan yanga, yatamati yatashrutam, yatamati yatashrutam, kirtim hare swam sat kartum. Kirtim hare swatat kartum, Yeramanya bidasatim, Yeramanya bidasatim. Tata, therefore, api, although it is so, kirtayami, I do describe, anga, o vidura, yata, as much as, mati, intelligence, yata, as much as, shrutam, heard, kirtim, glories, harehe, of the Lord, swam, own, sat kartum, just purify, giram, speeches, anya bidha, otherwise, asatim, unchaste. Srila Prabhupada's translation. In spite of my inability, whatever I've been able to hear from the spiritual master and whatever I could assimilate, I am now describing in glorification of the Lord by pure speech, for otherwise my power of speaking would remain unchaste. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The purification of the conditioned soul necessitates purification of his consciousness. By the presence of consciousness, the presence of the transcendental soul is verified. And as soon as consciousness leaves the body, the material body is not active. Consciousness is perceived, therefore, by activities. The theory put forward by empiric philosophers that consciousness can remain in an inactive state is the proof of their poor fund of knowledge. One should not become unchaste by stopping the activities of pure consciousness. If the activities of pure consciousness are stopped, certainly the conscious living force will be otherwise engaged, because unless engaged, the consciousness has no standing. Consciousness cannot be silent even for a moment. When the body does not act, the consciousness acts in the form of dreams. Unconsciousness is artificial. By induced extraneous help, it remains for a limited period. But when the intoxication of the drug is finished, or when one is awake, the consciousness again acts earnestly. Maitreya's statement is that in order to avoid unchaste conscious activities, he was trying to describe the unlimited glories of the Lord, although he did not have the ability to describe them perfectly. This glorification of the Lord is not a product of research, but the result of hearing submissively from the authority of the spiritual master. It is also not possible to repeat all that one has heard from his spiritual master, but one can narrate as far as possible by one's honest endeavor. It does not matter whether the Lord's glories are fully explained or not. One must attempt to engage one's bodily, mental, and verbal activities in the transcendental glorification of the Lord. Otherwise, such activities will remain unchaste and impure. The existence of the conditioned soul can be purified only by the method of engaging mind and speech in the service of the Lord. The Tridandi Sannyasi of the Vaishnava school accepts 3 rods, representing the vow to engage in the service of the Lord with body, mind, and speech, whereas the Ekadandi Sannyasi takes the vow to become one with the Supreme. Since the Lord is the Absolute, there is no distinction between him and his glories. The glories of the Lord, as chanted by the Vaishnava Sannyasi, are as substantial as the Lord himself. And thus, while glorifying the Lord, the devotee becomes one with him in transcendental interest, although he remains eternally a transcendental servitor. This simultaneously one and different position of the devotee makes him eternally purified, and thus his life becomes a complete success. Yatapi kirtayanyanga, yata mati yata shrutam, kirtim hare swam satkartum, girim anya bida satim. I have people telling me that somehow the Zoom is not opening properly. In spite of my inability, whatever I've been able to hear from the spiritual master and whatever I could assimilate, I am now describing in glorification of the Lord by pure speech, for otherwise my power of speaking would remain unchaste. So we want to be able to have purification of our consciousness. We want to be able to have purification of our consciousness. We are all suffering due to impurities. And I mean, this is a basic principle of purity is there in every culture of the world. There was sociological research done about universal moral principles. Are there moral principles that apply in every society and in every culture at all times? Now, of course, the sociological research is not absolute, but it's still interesting that they found 5 universal moral principles: purity, authority, fairness, community, and harm. But purity is a universal principle, that people want to do what's pure rather than what's impure. And we can see that such a principle is rooted in biology. If you do pure things, you're healthy, and if you do impure things, you're unhealthy. I mean, it's a pretty simple biological principle that's applicable to all forms of life. Of course, how one defines purity and impurity will vary considerably depending on the body and the culture. So in some societies, they'll think meat eating is, as long as the meat's killed in a certain way or whatever, that it's pure. But the concept of having purity, rather than impurity is universal. We want purity, we want health. Yes, we want vitality. We want to be real, we want to be awake and alive. Obviously sometimes we like to sleep as a restoration or as an escape perhaps, but we would like to be filled all the time with vitality. So here Srila Prabhupada is defining this purity as of consciousness as something that, well, we'll step back a minute. He's saying consciousness means activity, that artificially you can stop activity of a conscious being for a temporary time, but that consciousness is manifest in activity. And therefore, if we're looking for pure consciousness, we're looking for pure activity. That pure activity both purifies our consciousness and it is a manifestation of our consciousness. There's many activities like that. For example, if you give someone you love a gift, so that giving of a gift both demonstrates the love that already exists and it creates more love. So activities, purified activities, both demonstrate purity of consciousness that already exists, and they serve to purify consciousness. Now, here especially, the emphasis is on purity of speech, although Srila Prabhupada talks considerably in this purport about body, mind, and speech. Body, mind, and speech. So we're going to look particularly at how we become purified by pure speech. And we're going to look particularly at how pure speech purifies us, rather than so much how pure speech is an indicator of an already purified consciousness. How we can engage in pure speech as a spiritual practice, as part of the practice of bhakti. So Srila Prabhupada's main point in this purport is that spirituality means action, action. And he's connecting pure speech to the body and mind. In other words, in order for our speech to purify us, our behavior and our mind also have to be engaged in purificatory activities. Srila Prabhupada would often say that you can't tell a well-dressed person is a fool until they open their mouth. And the truth of this is demonstrated every day in the news, where many well-dressed, sophisticated people prove their foolishness by opening their mouth. Yes, and I'm sure we've experienced also that, we may think that somebody is intelligent, or somebody is moral, or somebody is spiritual until they speak. And then we can understand, oops, that goes the other way as well. Just like King Rahugana saw Jadbharata, and he thought that he was, had some mental deficiency. He thought that he was not a fully functional person, and he felt that he was a low-class person as well. He was very dirty. And as soon as Jadbharata spoke, Rahugana said, oh, the devotees are often in disguise. Immediately he can understand, I'm in the association of a saintly person. So our speech, in order for our speech to be pure, we have to have bodily activities that are pure. If we're engaging in illicit sex, intoxication, gambling, and meat eating, we're not going to be able to have pure speech. It just won't work. Right? If we're engaged in the activities of the mode of ignorance, then our speech will be foolish. If we're engaged in the activities of the mode of passion, then our speech will be a source of misery. Then also our mind has to be engaged in Krishna consciousness, because whatever the condition of our mind is, will come out in our speech somehow or other. We may try to avoid it, but it's not going to be absolutely avoidable. Therefore, the Shastra says one should test guru and disciple for a year. One may hear somebody for an hour and think, oh yeah, but if you, over the course of a year, the person's mentality is going to be demonstrated in their speech. And this is a very easy principle to see with others. It's very easy to discern with others that we can tell if we listen to somebody for a while, what their state is. They'll reveal it in their speech. So we need to work on purifying our body and mind in order to purify our speech. And then also, I often like to talk about the austerities of speech in the Bhagavad-Gita, the austerities in the mode of goodness, that speech has to be truthful, right? We shouldn't lie. Sometimes it's better to say nothing than to speak the truth, however. And Krishna says that if, a murderer is asking where his intended victim is hiding, you don't tell him the truth. But sometimes if the truth will hurt people, then it's better to be silent. Yes, otherwise we commit another offense of preaching the glories of the Lord to the faithless. Then another austerity of speech is to regularly recite the Vedic literature, which is what we're going to get to in a moment. Another austerity of speech is to be pleasing, to speak things which are pleasing, which is why sometimes one simply goes silent. So that means the message itself is pleasing. You know, in Vedic society, the bearer of bad news sometimes would be punished, and the bearer of good news would sometimes be rewarded. And I was thinking, if that principle was active in society, you know, we'd probably be a lot more careful about what we said. Then not agitating to others. So this means using pleasing words. We can see how these principles of austerity of speech are heavily violated in modern society, where people use very nasty and agitating language to communicate unpleasant things that are not truthful and not based on the Vedas. And then the other austerity of speech is beneficial, which is the primary austerity, that what we say should benefit both ourselves and the person to whom we are speaking. This means speaking according to time, place, and circumstance. This morning I was hearing a lecture where Srila Prabhupada was speaking about Jesus Christ and how the people in his society crucified him just for preaching God consciousness. He said, therefore, he had to present truth in a different way than we would be presenting truth today. So according to the ability of people to hear, according to people's level of advancement and realization, according to the extent and kind of their false ego, you know, if we speak truth that simply disturbs people and simply makes them angry or simply makes them offensive, then that's not pure speech. And we're going to go to the point about being based on the Vedic literature. And this point is very much emphasized in today's verse, Shrutam, how we have heard, not concocting something. It's very important, a very important principle that I was trained in early on in my time in the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, is that everything we say, we should be able to back it up from the scriptures. You know, if someone says, where is that from? We should be able to say, here's where it's from. And I have found that this principle is not observed as well as it could be, that people will share things and, you know, where'd you hear that from? You know, one of the difficult things, at least I find difficult about Hinduism, is that there's often among Hindus, and there are many Hindus who are not Indian, by the way, and many Indians who are not Hindus. It's not a racial designation. But among Hindus, there's often so many stories about this demigod and that demigod and this incarnation and this person, and you have no idea where they're from. You know, where's that story from? And these stories just get passed all over the place. And where is it from? Where is it from? And even if you can say, okay, it's from this scripture, who has translated it? You know, is it a good translation? So to make sure that we're reciting the Vedic literature, to make sure that what we're speaking about comes from authority. Prabhupada saying here, hearing means to hear from the spiritual master, to come from authority, not to concoct things. And also to hear from authority means that we study holistically, not that we pull out something from authority that supports our preconceived point of view, which is a very strong tendency of conditioned souls. You know, that I already have a particular point of view, and so I do a search and I find the quote that supports, what I want to say, and I don't go to the quotes that make me wrong. So a really honest hearing. Then Srila Prabhupada writes in this purport about honest endeavor. Let's see if I can. Yes, here. One can narrate as far as possible by one's honest endeavor. And we find in the verse itself, in spite of my inability. So to make an honest endeavor, to have some sincerity. People often ask, what does it mean to be sincere? And it is a hard word to define. What is an honest endeavor? What is a sincere endeavor? In one sense, if we look in our hearts, honestly, we will probably find ourselves lacking in sincerity. Of course, when you're new to Krishna consciousness, you think you're the most sincere person on the planet. That's another thing. The false confidence that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes about in Madhurya Kadambini. But at least as far as we can in the moment we're in. As far as we can in the moment we're in. So in this particular moment, whatever sincerity, whatever honesty, whatever attachment, whatever love I have, let me act with that. It may be insufficient, it is insufficient. It's probably mixed with something. It's probably, I probably have so many other motives, but it's all I have right now. I can only give what I have. I can't give something that I don't have. And all of us have some sincerity. I mean, Rupa Goswami talks about having just a mustard seed worth of sincerity, but we all have some sincerity. So to pull that, to do our very, very best to be honest. Yes, Rukmini talks about without wax, sincere. So to fix pots without cheating, at least without knowledgeable cheating. So again, I have so many impurities in my heart of which I'm aware, and I have so many impurities in my heart, frankly, of which I'm not aware. I probably think that I'm a much more sincere and honest person than I really am, at least according to research. Most people think they're above average, which of course is statistically impossible. But most people think that we're above average in intelligence, that we're above average in honesty, that we're above average drivers, that we're above average in morality. The research shows that generally people think that they are better than the average, which by definition cannot be true. So there we have many deficiencies of which we are aware, and then we have many deficiencies of which we're not aware. And all we can do is what we can do in the moment, but at least not to be intentionally cheating, not to be willfully, knowingly cheating, to do our best with what we have. Then Prabhupada speaks about in this purport, writes about in this purport, real oneness. Is kind of interesting. At first reading this paragraph, I thought that the editors had failed to separate the paragraph properly. Right? I mean, Srila Prabhupada is talking about the beginning, whatever we hear for honest endeavor, and to engage our body, mind, and words in the service of the Lord. And then he writes about the Tridandi sannyasis of the Vaishnava school and the three rods representing the body, mind, and words. And the Ekadandi sannyasis want to become one. And then I thought, well, it seems like there should be a paragraph split here. It seems like Prabhupada's going on to a new topic. Since the Lord is the absolute, there is no distinction between him and his glories. But here, Srila Prabhupada is explaining how the Vaishnava sannyasis or the Vaishnavas do become one with the Lord. Because as soon as I use my speech to glorify the Lord, I'm finding a oneness in transcendental interest. I become one with the Lord in interest. And when I become one with the Lord of interest, Prabhupada said, I become purified and my life becomes a complete success. So our glorification of the Lord should also be such that we become one with him in interest. that we glorify him for his interest. We glorify him for his pleasure. Okay, so I was asked to give another class this morning, so I'm going to end this class here, and then we're going to start at another topic. Okay, so today is the 16th of May, 2020, a Zoom class from Columbus, Ohio. And we were asked to give a class on how to give a class. So generally, when I give a class on how to give a class, it's at least a 2-hour program, and it's very interactive. So usually we spend an hour on theory and then an hour on practice. I've often given this class over several days in Radhadesh not that long ago. I don't remember how many days. I think it was like 4 or 5 days that we went over this class. So keeping that in mind, right now we have a half an hour, and with a half an hour, all I can do is go over theory, and I will have to leave it to all of you to take up the practice on your own time. Ideally, this would be something that there would be a lot of feedback. You would take up the practice, and I would be giving you feedback and so forth. Okay, so the elements in giving a class. Oh, I should first sort of introduce myself here. The purpose of an introduction is to gain some faith in the speaker. So it always amuses me when people introduce me at the end of a class. And generally, one does not introduce oneself. Anyway, such is life. So why is it that that you should be tuned in for this part of the class today? So I had the great fortune when I went to high school, when I went to secondary school. I went to Morris Hills High School in New Jersey, and I joined the Speaking and Debate Club. It was an after-school club, and I had as my teacher and trainer a gentleman called Gerald Lasso, who's passed away. And he was one of the top coaches of speaking and debate in the whole United States. His students consistently won awards, and he himself had won a number of awards. And so for the 3 years that I was in secondary school, I participated in the Speaking and Debate Club. We called it the Forensics Club, although forensics is often applied to things with crime and detective studies. And it was a very rigorous program. I mean, we met 3 times a week for 2 to 3 hours each time. We competed all over the state and all over the country. I was the state champion one year. I was the district champion another year. I got up to the quarterfinals and the national competition. And I had quite a lot of training in public speaking, in other words. So it's not just something out of my own head. The other day I was speaking to a former student of mine who practices astrology, and he says, unlike a lot of people who take up astrology, I had a teacher. And he was, in today's verse in the Bhagavad-Gita, when we were reading 3.6.36, that we should be, what we're speaking about Krishna, we should hear from a teacher. And similarly, even if we're talking about any sort of expertise, we should have learned from an expert. We might also ask the question, so hopefully I've answered the question as to why I should be teaching this, but we may also have a question as to why we should learn about giving a class at all. There is often a mood in our Hare Krishna movement among Krishna devotees that I don't really need any training in the craft of my service. That what we were speaking about in the Bhagavad-Gita class today, that having purification of body and mind, hearing from authorities, making an honest endeavor, that such is sufficient. Such is sufficient. And then, Krishna just tells me what to say and how to say it. And that's that. Well, there's truth to that. It's not that there's not truth to that. But one of the 26 qualities of a devotee is daksha, or expert. And we find in the history of Vaishnavas that devotees go through some training. Jiva Goswami went through training to become expert in Sanskrit. He didn't just say, well, Krishna's just going to empower me and I'm just going to sit down and be honest. Arjuna, if we think about Arjuna, what effort he made to become expert in his craft of archery. Arjuna was watching Bhimsen eat and seeing that Bhimsen could eat in the dark. He could find his mouth in the dark. So he decided, well, maybe I can shoot in the dark. And so he would go out at night and practice shooting in the dark. And Dronacharya saw this and was very pleased with him that he was making this effort to practice his craft. We find the artists in Iskcon, they take instructions, they learn how to practice their craft. I've been in a number of temples where cooks don't think they have to practice. They don't think they have to learn from anyone. And it's not pleasant. If someone just goes in the kitchen, I've told these stories many times. How I was in a temple where the cook felt that she neither needed to learn from a teacher personally, nor even to learn from a teacher in a cookbook. And she made avocado halva. Unfortunately, there was a gurukul in that temple. So the children really were suffering with this woman's cooking. She made a sabji once where she cut up red cabbage and cooking bananas, plantains, but big pieces of cooking bananas, like 3-4 inches long, and eggplant. So big pieces of eggplant, big pieces of cooking banana or plantain, big pieces of red cabbage, and she put them together and steamed them. She steamed them and put a little salt on it, and it was practically speaking inedible. So if you go into the kitchen, you should learn how to cook, take some of Kurma's classes or at least read his cookbook. Now we have our deity worship academy. So we understand now, before you go on the altar, you should get some training. One of my good friends just spent some months there in Mayapur. There's a whole classes, how to wrap a turban. Not that you just go and throw something on Krishna, So in the same way, we should become expert in our craft of preaching. We should become expert in our craft of speaking and not just, well, I'm a devotee, I'm so pure, etc. All right, we're going to go through the different elements of giving a public lecture. Again, this half-an-hour class is outrageously insufficient, but it's something. So first, mood. So first is the proper mood. So the mood should be of service. And of course, we read this in the purport of today's class, 3636, where Prabhupada was talking about having an honest endeavor and trying to glorify the Lord, really having this oneness of interest with the Lord. And also, we talked about the beneficial aspect of speech. And this means I'm trying to connect with the needs of my audience. And one of the difficulties with giving classes over the internet like this is that often there is kind of a disconnect with the audience. It's hard to tell, who's there. When you're sitting in a room speaking to people, you can pick up if people are falling asleep or if they're leaving or looking at their watches. And that's a little difficult to do over the internet. But in preparing to give a class, to have some idea of the people to whom you'll be speaking, what are the needs in their life? We want to connect with what interests them, what concerns them, not just what interests me. I mean, I've heard many classes where people are speaking just about their interests and their needs and what fascinates them. And it may have nothing to do with what the audience needs. And to meditate on making things clear and relevant to the audience. Okay, then the delivery, a public lecture is not that much different than speaking to another individual, just one-on-one, except it's bigger. Now, again, here with Zoom, it's a little hard because you can't even see all of my gestures, and they have to be very close because the screen is not big enough if I move my hands out here, right? But it should be conversational, but a little bigger. So whereas, you know, in a conversation, if I keep my hands here, in a class, I'm going to make it a little bigger. My voice is going to be a little louder, my facial expressions a little bit more pronounced, my gestures a little bigger, but the delivery should be very much like a conversation. In a conversation, we don't just stand stiff and unmoving. We don't just look at the floor the whole time. We don't just, you know, play with our clothes the whole time. And I've seen speakers who just, you know, play with their wedding ring, or they play with their clothes, or they play with their sika, or, you know, something the whole time, or they just, I've seen speakers who have their eyes closed the whole time. You know, so I'm not quite sure when they pause whether or not they have fallen asleep. Another thing with delivery is not to apologize. Prabhupada said, if you come to dance, don't wear a veil. So don't get up to speak and say, well, I'm not qualified. I mean, of course, in today's verse, he says, despite my inability. But then he says, despite my inability, I'm going to repeat what I've heard. So I may have some inability, but I'm qualified, he's saying, because I'm saying what I've heard. So if we're not qualified to speak, we shouldn't speak. I remember seeing a devotee once who said, I'll give Bhagavatam class, but not on the Vyasa-san. It's like, if you're going to give class, you sit on the Vyasa-san. It's Vyasa's asan anyway, it's not yours. It's for the book, it's not for you. And this sort of apology is distasteful. It's distasteful. I mean, imagine going to a musical concert and the musicians get up and say, you know, I haven't practiced, I haven't any training, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm a terrible musician. You're going to get up and leave. You'll say, why should I listen to you? To have eye contact, again, that's a little difficult over Zoom. Good postures, you don't want to be slumped over and falling into your chair, and to have some confidence in what you're saying. If we don't have confidence in the message of the Lord, if we don't have confidence in what our spiritual master has taught us, then why should we be speaking? All right, now we're going to go on to content. So you want to determine the topic. Now, sometimes you're speaking on a particular topic, and sometimes we're speaking on a particular verse. So when we can choose a topic, we find something that's relevant and of interest to both us, because I have to care about it, and to my audience. Then I pick a particular theme and state it in 1 or 2 sentences. Now, if I'm going to be speaking on a verse, then we're going to go down here and look. Can I do this here? Okay. Doesn't seem to work when I'm sharing a screen. Okay, whatever. So when we're looking at a particular verse, we want to isolate the principle of the verse. So if I'm choosing a theme, I can choose whatever theme is relevant. I might say, well, I think this audience will be interested in reincarnation, or I think this audience will be interested in the God as a person, or I think this audience will be interested in how to have a nice marriage. When I'm starting with a verse, then I want to find the principle of the verse. I want to find the principle of the verse. Now, my own conviction is that every verse in the scriptures has at least 200 principles. A principle I'm defining here as a universal transcontextual truth that one can write in a declarative sentence, as a statement. So for the class I gave this morning, my principle was that pure speech purifies us. That was the principle I isolated. I could have isolated other principles. I could have isolated harmony of interest with the Lord is real oneness. I could have picked that as a principle. I could have picked as a principle, we can be empowered beyond our ability. So there's all sorts of principles that I could have picked. So you want to pull out as many principles as you can from the verse, and then pick one principle. Every class that is presented should have one theme or one principle. Only one, just one, only one principle. Don't pick two, don't pick five, don't pick seven, one principle. We can have as many sub categories as we want, sub, but we want to have one main point that we're making in the class. Okay, then we are going to take that principle and we're going to break it up into areas. Now, generally, we want to break it up into 3 areas because most people can't remember more than that in a class. This morning, I broke mine up into 4. I broke mine up into spirituality means to act purely by body, mind, and speech. Pure speech is based on hearing, based on honest endeavor, and is based on real oneness. So those were my 4 areas, but certainly not more than that, and not less than 2. If you have less than 2, then you're jumbling all these things together, and it won't be clear to people. Think of the areas kind of like chapters in a book. Now, the areas can be divided up in different ways. They can be divided up, as we're mentioning here, as, I don't know why I can't highlight in this, it's really frustrating. Anyway, hopefully you can at least see this, as spatial, chronological, parallel, cause, effect, solution, effect, cause, solution, principle, general application, personal application, and other ways. So the easiest way is just parallel. That's what I did this morning. That pure speech is based on hearing, pure speech is based on honest endeavor, and pure speech is based on real oneness. So those are parallel. We could also do it chronological. Pure speech in ancient times, pure speech today, pure speech in the future. And we'd probably be talking a lot there about time, place, and circumstance. We could talk chronologically about pure speech of different personalities in history. Like, how did Sankaracharya speak purely, and how did Buddha speak purely according to their audience? How did Mahaprabhu speak purely? We could speak about it spatially. We could speak about what is pure speech if we're speaking to audiences in India, if we're speaking to audiences in China, if we're speaking to audiences in the United States. We could talk about cause, effect, solution. So what is the cause of difficulty and confusion in the world? And the effect is that people are lost and suffering, and the solution is pure speech. We could talk about cause of our personal suffering is our impure consciousness. The effect of our impure consciousness is that we engage in impure activities that entangle us in karma. The solution is to take up pure speech. Then I could do it a different way. I could talk about the effect. I'm entangled in bad karma. The cause of that is my impure consciousness. The solution is pure speech. I could do it principle, general application, personal application. I could say, well, there's a universal principle that pure speech purifies us. How is this applied in the world? I could speak about, people who speak purely, such as Sheila Prabhupada, people who speak impurely, like certain, political leaders and business leaders and so forth, so that people come to accept the general principle of the importance of pure speech. Then we can speak about pure speech as applied to us. How do I feel when I speak purely? How do I feel when I speak impurely? And then get people to make a commitment to go on with pure speech. A way to understand this, we look at when delivering the speech. We first give some sort of an introduction to capture people's attention. Lord Kapila speaks about using the mind as a hook to capture the Lord. So our introduction acts as a hook to capture people's attention. Then we tell people what we're going to talk about. We always put it, tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you told them. Then we speak on the areas in the same order that we introduce them. Then we list them again. So today I talked about, then we give a conclusion, and then we ask for questions. Another way to do this is to give the passage of the scripture, to say the verse, to tell people what the principle is you're going to talk about, and then to establish the truth of that principle in a general way. This is really the principle, general application, personal application. Then get people to understand how the principle applies to them, to ask people to make a commitment based on their understanding of the principle, and then to have some way to evaluate the change. So here we're going to these 6 steps here, that we pray for empowerment to change people. We prepare the way we want people to change in relation to their needs. We plan the whole lecture towards this application because we want people to make a change. And we have the application, we choose that first, and we structure information around application. We ask people to take up specific steps of application, what they will do to accomplish it. We illustrate how they will apply it with Shastra history, personal experience, and imagination. And then we employ an appropriate style of rapport when calling for commitment. All right, I'm going to stop here. And if we have any questions on the verse, or if we have any questions on how to give a class, we have 10 minutes.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, there was a question on YouTube from last Sunday's lecture.
Okay.
Since many days trying to figure out about spiritual perspectiveness on careers, really wish to have the book. How can I receive the book, please?
Well, we have to print it first. So we're in the editing stages. We're hoping to have it printed this year.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhu. And then we have a question from Ramtit Prabhu. Ramtit Prabhu, please go ahead.
Yeah, Hare Krishna Mataji, please accept my
Hare
humble
Krishna.
all blessings of Prabhupada. Thank you for the wonderful class, the 2 topics. So regarding the second topic, how to give classes, I have a couple of questions. One is how to handle criticism or appreciation after giving the class.
Appreciation is easy. If it's general appreciation, just say thank you and mentally give all the credit to your spiritual master and to Krishna. If it's specific information, Rukmini has put in the chat window a URL you can go to so that you can receive announcements about when the book will be ready. If it's very specific appreciation, then you might even make a note of it, and you might plan that in the future, you're going to emphasize that in your classes. If you get criticism, then if it's a criticism of Shastra or of our acharyas, one should be prepared to, can the document be shared with us? Yeah, give me a minute. One should be prepared to defend the Shastra and our acharyas. If you don't feel qualified to do that, then you should be able to refer the person to somebody who can do that. You should be able to say, this is where you can find the information that will answer your question. If you don't know that, you should be able to say, I do not know, but I will endeavor to find out. As far as personal criticism, thank you very much for giving me that personal criticism, and I will take that on board and I will try to improve in the future. If it's general criticism, that's all you can say. If it's specific criticism, then really give it some thought. How can I improve that? What can I do to improve?
Okay. Thank you, Mataji. So I have another question. If it is okay, if time permits, I can ask another question. Is that okay, Mataji?
Sure.
Okay. And sometimes, when we are speaking on the Sunday feast classes where there are audience, mixed audience, meaning there are some practicing devotees, there are some new
Yes.
people, and choosing a topic may be challenging in that case because we cannot satisfy all the audience. So in that case,
So I've seen people deal with this in different ways. I've seen some speakers who just aim everything at the newer members, but then the senior members tend to be bored. There are always universal needs. And if you have a very mixed audience, go for something that's going to be a universal need. And then you want to vary some of your examples so that you'll capture everyone's attention. Give some examples that will be more applicable to new people and some examples that will be more applicable to senior people, and trust that people will get what they need from it.
okay.
Okay, Mahalakshmi?
Thank you.
You have to unmute yourself, Mahalakshmi.
Okay, now I found it.
Okay. Hi, Krishna.
I was in a class, I was giving the class, and at the end, one senior devotee started complaining that women should not be giving class, that we were changing Prabhupada's procedure, that women would never give class in public. And she was much elder than me, so I let her talk. But then I also mentioned, when there was a space, that, well, there is nothing I can do about this. I've been asked to do this service. Maybe you have to go to the management. But the whole situation, she was very, very upset and talking very badly, in very bad temper. So I just like, okay, you can keep on. If nobody has a question, if someone has a question, okay, but if otherwise, but I have nothing to say. So I've been always a bit unsure about how would have been the best way to deal with that.
I don't know if there is a best way. Prabhupada sometimes would just start a kirtan if somebody was making a big disturbance. He would usually let them speak for a while, like Norden Muni let Daksha speak for a while. I probably would just look at the person and saying, well, why are you sitting in my class? And that's probably what I do. I'd say, if that's how you understand Srila Prabhupada's instructions, why are you here listening to me? Nobody's forcing you to listen to me. You can go home and turn on a Prabhupada lecture if you want. That would be my main response. And then I'd probably say, maybe you're not aware. That's how I would start. I'd say, I understand that you feel very strongly on this point, but I'm curious as to why you're subjecting yourself to my class if you think that my very act of giving class is in opposition to Srila Prabhupada. And perhaps you're not aware that Srila Prabhupada personally asked women to give class in his presence, even in India.
Yeah, I gave one.
We lost you. Anyway, I would probably say something like that. I'd probably say, you may also not be aware that Prabhupada personally instructed devotees that women should give classes. And maybe you're not aware of this. There was a time in Iskcon when women were not giving classes, but that was in opposition to Prabhupada's instructions, not in accord with Prabhupada's instructions. And people who joined Iskcon during that time may have the idea that what was going on was in accord with Prabhupada's desires. So I would suggest that you do the research and find out, it's not possible for all of us to know everything about everything, and maybe do a little bit more research into what Srila Prabhupada did and what Srila Prabhupada's instructed. And then, you can choose who you want to listen to. You're not obliged to listen to people that you think are not proper. So that's up to you.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry if my speaking disturbed you. I'm assuming that when I'm speaking, people who are listening to me are doing so voluntarily. And if that's not the case with you, I really apologize that somehow the situation is forced to you. Rukmini.
Thank you, Marie, for that class. So my question is about the word unchaste in the verse. When giving the class about giving the class, you mentioned that when it's desirable to be expert. And so many people often spend years not giving any class because they know that they're not expert. Yet in this verse, Maitreya says, one must speak about what one has heard, otherwise one's hearing will be unchaste. So what does that mean?
Prabhupada was very happy with little 3-year-old Saraswati just for going up to people and saying Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Obviously, a 3-year-old doesn't have any training. I do feel personally very strongly that people should not be going into temple kitchens and on temple altars and temple vyasasans without some training. It's not that just because I have some sincerity and I've just gotten, my Gayatri mantras, I should run in the altar and dress the deities without, or I should run in the kitchen and make avocado halva. And in the same way, it's not that I should just run and give a class without training. But even without any training, we can always speak to people about Krishna. It's not that I have to walk around with duct tape on my mouth, until I'd gone through a 3-year course on public speaking. So that's not, I don't mean to imply that. And I can certainly go in the kitchen as an apprentice, and I can assist and I can be guided. That's part of training. And part of being training is getting some opportunity to speak. What I know I don't know if they still do it, but in Iskcon Soho, when people were being trained in speaking, they would sometimes give the noon class, which was, it was attended by some of the public. It wasn't a largely attended class, and it wasn't one of the main temple classes, but that way they could get some practice and some feedback and so forth. So there can always be opportunities for people who are in training to do something on a beginning level. Is that all right?
Yes, that's, I just found it a striking word even when I first heard the verse or read the verse, or maybe not when I first read it, but at least for some years that this word unchaste, it was quite
Strong.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, we can take one more and then that will be it. So Hari's iPad. I don't know, does the iPad ask the question?
I think Naveen Prabhu can ask the question.
Okay, Prabhu. Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you, Urmila Mataji. So thank you very much. You echoed my own feelings. We do have a procedure, protocols in Columbus Krishna House that how to give a class, some recommendations like the guidelines. But one of the challenge we have is not many people follow. So we have two options. Once the sit and assistant, sometimes people say I'm here, I'm going to give, but some don't even prepare. Some prepare and then go on. There is a principle, introduction, body, time for questions, when to stop, and how to address some questions asked by the people who are trying to in a fighting mood. But not many people follow that. But I do have a question based on that. There are two options. You tell them 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, they don't listen. And 3rd time, we can stop them giving the class. Then they will go on and say that I'm not giving an opportunity to give a class. How do you balance this?
I've never found it to be very effective to tell people what to do or what not to do. I've just never found that to be very effective. It works a tiny fraction of the time. What is effective is training and creating a culture where expertise is valued. So if there are regular classes in speaking and preparation, and you have a system that if you want to speak in the temple, we expect you to take this course. Just like I said, when I went to Radhadesh, they had me give, it was at least a 4-day course on public speaking. We may expect people to take the deity worship course. We may expect people to take a cooking course. We may expect people to take a teacher training course. We may expect people to take a leadership course. So just handing somebody rules and expecting them to follow, I've just never found that to be effective. Also, if people aren't trained, they may not even know how to follow. They may not really even understand it. So to have actual training programs, and then, you could periodically have some kind of meeting of the people who regularly give classes and discuss their craft. How can we improve? I mean, what a wonderful example that would be for Iskcon. If, 3 or 4 times a year, the speakers got together and, if you want to speak in Iskcon Columbus, you're expected to take the course and you're expected to participate in these discussions because we want to become expert in our craft. And then it's not a question of just telling people and getting upset when they don't listen. Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Yeah.
Urmila Mataji ki jai.
Yeah, thank you everybody for joining our Sravanam Saturdays program. And this was really a big encouragement for all the devotees. As you were speaking, my Mother Urmila, that this was the Sravanam Saturdays is kind of an encouragement for people who don't tend to give class because they're kind of nervous, like you were giving the example of the Soho temple. So this is kind of it's kind of like a program where not many people attend, but it's very nice for people to get experience in that and get trained. It's broadcasted on YouTube every week. At least when the temple was open, it was very nice. So if somebody is interested in giving a class, I'll definitely refer them to the document and this lecture. And once again, we'd like to thank Mother Urmila for serving last Sunday's Sunday Feast lecture and this Sravanam Saturday program. So we're very grateful. And just a couple announcements before we go. Tomorrow's Sunday Feast is given by Her Grace Malti Prabhu, and she's going to be enlightening us on another topic. And
You're breaking up,
we will get devotees, and then and then on Mondays Ekadasi, and Tuesday is Ekadasi. There'll be another 3-hour kirtan, and then on Tuesday it's going to be it's the Dwadasi, and it's also the appearance day of Sheila Vrindavan Das Thakur. So that's the festivals list for the next couple this next week. So thank you everybody for joining, and thank you again, Mother Urmila. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam apavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Hari Prabhu.